Hello, Whovians, and welcome to the third channel. Thank you for coming over to the channel from the main channel to hear more from the wonderful, the amazing Phil Hawkins.
Hello again.
Now he is, if you don't know, he's a YouTuber best known for Doctor Who. But this interview is going to be nothing to do with Doctor Who. If you want to hear his thoughts on everything from Autons to Cybermen to the Missing to the Master to everything Doctor Who, go and check out Doctor Who in the description, either on YouTube, over on the Tom Mason channel, or anywhere you get your podcasts from. Now the first question is, how did you get into YouTube and the idea to create your wonderful channel?
Well, basically it has sort of two strands to it. One was an idea I'd had for years that I wanted to do, and I hadn't found a way of doing it. And it wasn't necessarily going to start off as a video thing, but I'd always had this idea to try and celebrate a different wacky holiday every day of the year. And it was, National Burger Day. I did throw in a few traditional ones as well, like, Christmas Day and Valentine's Day and things, but to do something every day of the year. So I had this idea that I wanted to do that. And then a similar time that I was thinking, oh, maybe I could do this in video form. I had some friends who were doing a Doctor Who series on one of their YouTube channels, and they were reviewing every episode of Doctor Who immediately after it aired. That was called Doctor Who Debrief, and that was on my friend Rob's channel, who now doesn't do any Doctor Who stuff at all. He does travel vlogs now, but at the time he was doing mostly Doctor Who stuff. And so him and my other friend Chris, they were doing this series, and they invited me on to sort of just be a guest on it. And I hadn't done any YouTube at this point, and I had a really good time. It was just basically us sitting on a couch. We'd all watched it together, and afterwards just did a little review of it all together, like just discussing it on a couch. I thought that was quite a fun format. And after I guested again the following season on it again for just one episode, and I said to them, do you fancy doing this for classic Doctor Who as well? We could just start at the beginning and work our way through. And they were up for it. And he did. In the end, I was like, Rob, I can't remember if Rob didn't want it on his channel, or if we just felt like, oh, well, I could just do it. I could set up a channel to do it on. And I kind of had this account where I'd posted like the ice bucket challenge from many years ago, and a few other like a random video I'd edited from a trip to a music festival. So I was like, oh, okay, we'll use that and I'll do it on there. So we started that, and because their series was called Doctor Who Debrief, I called mine Doctor Who Rebrief, because it was the same format. It was like a spin-off of their show, but rebrief because we're reviewing old stuff. And we started like at the very beginning, William Hartnell first episode, and we batch recorded them. We did it like they would come and stay at my house, and over one night we would watch 3 whole serials in one night. Watch a serial, record the review, watch a serial, record the review. And that's kind of how the Doctor Who side of things started. And then as I started to release those in beginning of 2017, I think that was right at the end of 2016, and then the beginning of 2017, I started doing the video a day celebrating holidays, little random videos every day as well. So that was the kind of the 2 bits of genesis of my channel. Eventually, they decided, my co-hosts on the rebrief decided that they'd had a bit of enough of it. They'd kind of burnt themselves out of Doctor Who a bit, and Robert decided he wasn't doing any more on his channel. I think it was after reviewing Class. They didn't like Class, and it had just sort of killed their joy of Doctor Who. So they decided they didn't want to do it anymore. So I had started by that point doing other Doctor Who content, and I just carried on with other Doctor Who content after that.
Yeah. And on your channel, as well as Doctor Who, you do all sorts from other places like Star Trek and Marvel and this, that, and the other. And now with your love of Marvel, if you have one, who's your favorite Marvel superhero?
Don't think I do have one. I like a lot of them. In terms of their personality of the individual, Steve Rogers is, the kind of person that, just like he's the one you can admire the most, I think. And, has a grounding in like really good sort of moral character. They're all good in one way or another. I don't think I've got a massive favorite particularly.
And with Marvel being spread across several different like streaming services like Disney Plus, Netflix, and then you would say Hulu if you're in America, but it's on Star in the UK. Would you think that they'll ever like move the Netflix universe into the MCU with Jessica Jones and Iron Fist and
Wow, that's a point of contention, isn't it? Because some people are adamant that it's not part of the MCU, but my stance on it is what is on screen that matters. And yes, it was made by a different studio, but it was quite clearly established on screen by the fact that they reference stuff that happened in the movies. They reference the Battle of New York in the Netflix shows, that those shows are part of the MCU. And until they're contradicted otherwise on screen, that's my stance. They are the MCU. They are part of the MCU.
Yeah. And with Shield, I don't know if you've seen every series of Shield, but the first series was heavily linked to the MCU. But what did you think? Did you think the other series had like stuck to linking to what the films were on about?
Yeah, they did heavily do it in the first series, and quite a lot in the second series, but not quite as much. I mean, they like literally picked up the pieces of the films in the first series. The second series was a bit more tangentially related, but they did reference a lot of stuff. And later on, you had them referencing the Sokovia Accords and things like that. So they carried on linking into it for quite like referencing it quite a while. I think there was a lot of behind the scenes stuff that caused the sort of rift between the TV and the movie side of things, I think. Yeah. And from, was it series 5? They did some time traveling, which meant that there is even though in the story they claim they got back to their own time and their own universe, there's a bit of leeway there where you could say, well, maybe they didn't. Maybe they think they got back to their own universe, but they really didn't. So actually, it's a way of having those final few seasons not having to worry about what's happening in the movies. And it doesn't matter if it contradicts because they're over in a different universe because they've hopped over to it. But it's still the MCU.
Yeah. And did you ever see Inhumans? Because I saw it with my mum in the IMAX when they did the double bill at the IMAX when he thought it was one long episode.
Yeah, I did see the Inhumans. I've done a ranking of all the MCU TV shows on my channel, and that came last. Yeah. It had some good ideas, but some of the framing was like in terms of the guy that was the villain kind of shouldn't have been the villain. I mean, he was the royal family themselves were kind of the villains of their society, and he was kind of should have been the hero trying to free the people. But there we go. That's a whole different, and it was just a very gray TV series. There wasn't much color in it.
Yeah, and for me, what didn't work was when you saw it on TV, you had Shield on Channel 4 and E4 for the first series, and then that disappeared. Then you had all your DC TV shows on Sky, and then you had Inhumans randomly on Sky as well, which sort of don't work because they're trying to link. They're trying to say that they do superhero stuff, but it's like might confuse people that aren't as like loyal fans to the show.
Yeah, maybe. I think that's unavoidable when you're dealing with international markets. There are American shows that are being sold to the UK, and who they're going to sell them to whoever pays the most money in terms of the TV channels. So the similar thing happened with the DC stuff, where you got most of the shows going, I think, to Sky, but then Batwoman didn't. So even though that's set in the same continuity and in crosses over, they didn't have Batwoman wasn't being shown anywhere in the UK, which was a bit awkward when it came to the massive crossover Crisis on Infinite Earths, which was told in 5 parts over all the shows, and the Batwoman part of the story wasn't being shown in the UK. So that's just one of those annoying things.
And for Crisis, which we'll get on to, is because of the way it was, I found the DVD for it so I could watch it all. And so what they did was they had Batwoman, they swapped the episodes around with when they aired series 1 on E4. They had the crossover, instead of being near the beginning, it was like the very last episode. And then and then on the DVD you had Supergirl, Batwoman, Flash, Legends, and Arrow, but then you had to go to Netflix to go and watch Black Lightning. And that didn't really have an actual episode. They're all parts. They're all put in part 1, part 2, part 3, part 4. And then Black Lightning was just, you had to Google it and work out what episode that was linked to. And it would only be at the very end of the episode that they would reference the event. And so, about going on to DC, out of the DC TV series, which one would you say you preferred?
I've been meaning to do a ranking video of those as well, the Arrowverse. I might be Black Lightning, in terms of there are strongest individual seasons of some of the other shows. Like the first 2 seasons of Arrow are amazing. And they're stronger than Black Lightning. But as a whole series, Arrow had some really weak seasons in it as well. So I think as a whole, I think every season of Black Lightning was really good. So it's just literally finished its 4th and final season in America. So I'd say Black Lightning.
And that's what annoys me with the Arrowverse. You try and avoid spoilers, and with it like doing like a long break, and it's like, I don't know, like half a year later before you see it, everyone talks about it, and you know so much about it already. There's sort of no point watching them. And do you sort of like how Sky sort of like air it in the same way America does, with the first part and then a break and then the second part?
How to answer this question without sort of implicating myself too much? I don't watch it on Sky, so I don't know how Sky does it.
What do you watch it on?
The other ways that allow me to watch it as soon as it's on in America.
Well, with Sky, you watch it and you get so invested in what's going on, and then it's Christmas, and then it's months later before you pick up where you left off.
That is annoying. And I know we're not talking about Doctor Who here, but it annoys me. Like when Doctor Who started doing that as well, they'd have the mid-season, like season 7 part 1 and then 7B as well, and it's just like the break in the middle. That really annoyed me as well. I prefer them not to be broken up.
And for years now, or as ever long as I've known, there's always been dreams and fan edits of a Marvel versus DC film. Would you reckon that would work? Would Kevin Feige work well with whoever's running the DCEU, and how do you reckon they would be able to like link it up to each other?
I can't see them doing that for a very long time. Like Marvel, DC might be more up for it because they seem to be like trying loads of things, figuring that, this doesn't work, then trying something else. But Marvel seem to know what they're doing, know what they want, and they have no reason to. Their films are massively successful. They've got lots of other things to build up to. So they just have no reason to do it. If they ever do a Marvel versus DC movie, it's going to be because they've kind of run out of other ideas and they think this is the best way to make loads of money. So I don't think we'll be seeing it for a while.
Because I heard recently, the reason why I brought that up, because I heard recently that Disney are in talks to buy out DC, as in the superhero brand, not the shoe brand. But it'd be quite interesting to see how they do that, because so it's sort of with Disney, they want to make sure that things link up, and I would think that Disney would have to make their own little Disney universe where some DC characters would like be faffing around with them. Then it makes more sense. And it's not like divided fans even more, saying, "Oh,
Yeah,
this
if they
feels
ever
like
do it, it'll be these people are crossing over from another universe type thing.
yeah,
But like I say, I mean, they've got so much on their plate. They've got to, before anything like that even remotely becomes a possibility, Marvel have got to introduce the X-Men, the Fantastic Four, all of those characters, which they've only just acquired from Fox. So, yeah, it's going to be a long time before we see anything like DC versus Marvel.
Yeah, and DC need to sort of like sort out the odd bits and bobs, because in the Crisis you sort of saw a little bit of link between film and TV with I think he's called Ed. Well, it's a Flash from the Justice League films that he had made a brief cameo before he disappeared, which sort of like says that the DCEU doesn't exist anymore.
Well, they only think the multiverse has been destroyed, but we already know that it hasn't, because at the end of Crisis on Infinite Earths, the event, they showed us loads of new, like they showed, oh, this is now Earth, look what's happening now on Earth 2, and that's Stargirl, the TV series, and they showed various other ones as well. So that, yeah, the DCEU filmverse is just one of the universes in the DC multiverse. I'm hoping that in the Flash movie, because that's meant to be dealing with alternate universes, maybe we'll even see Grant Gustin's version of the Flash from the TV series in that for a brief cameo. That would be quite good.
Yeah, because I quite liked how with the TV series The Flash, they made a massive merge with the original Flash series from the 70s. And they brought the original Flash back to make it said that this TV show was old. We're going to bring him back just because the actor probably wants more work, and two, because it's.
Do you mean, are you talking about for the Flash played by the same guy that played his dad?
Yeah.
That's not quite from the 70s, not quite that long ago. It was a 90s TV show, that Flash.
Yeah, I must have been thinking of something else, because I saw you can buy a 70s Flash on iTunes.
Oh, okay. I don't know what that is.
No, it looks like a Batman and Robin type thing.
Okay.
Like a pow wow and that type of thing. Now moving away from superheroes and time travel to more of a different type of travel, more to something you do on your channel that I think, beside Doctor Who, one of my favorite things you do on your channel is the amazing Everybody's Dead Dave podcast.
Yes.
Which is where you review Red Dwarf. How did that begin? Where did this idea come from? Because it's unique.
That began because I was watching one of Adam Martin, my co-host on it, videos on his channel. It was one of his he used to do a Sunday catch-up thing where he'd just answer questions. And somebody asked him about Red Dwarf, and he mentioned on it that he'd never seen it. And I knew Adam because I'd been on his podcast before. So I was like, how could you not have seen Red Dwarf? That's ridiculous. Because anybody that watches Adam's channel will know that he's massively into like BBC history and like just general broadcasting history, and being a sci-fi fan as well. I was like, you've got to watch it. So I just went to him and said, do you fancy doing a podcast? You know, I'd be someone that had watched it several times. You'd be someone with a different perspective of watching it for the first time. We could do a podcast. And he was up for it. So that's what we did.
Wow.
It kind of, I got the idea as well from, there are two YouTubers, Jesse Gender and Council of Geeks, who have a podcast called What the Frel, which is basically the same sort of setup of somebody that is already a fan of something and somebody watching it for the first time, but for the sci-fi series Farscape. And so I listened to their podcast and I was like, hey, that's a good idea. And Adam hasn't watched Red Dwarf. Let's do something like that.
Yeah, and that's a very adaptable idea that's like spun from one thing. You can do it for many different things. So I can see down the line, see that to be a whole genre of like type of podcasts. and with Red Dwarf, that it's one of those programs that's really amazing, and I have a lot of the episodes on DVD and the very first ever episode on VHS. And what I want to know is that you will mention this on the podcast in the future. But I just want to know your opinion on it as a fan point of view. What did you think of like when it moved from series 8 on BBC today? Because when you watch it from Back to Earth to the final episode, the whole crew that was manifested, that was created, just disappears again, and they seem to never mention it. They only mention Kachansky's death.
Yeah, Back to Earth was a weird one, wasn't it? It's a strange little 3-part thing that kind of doesn't feel like the rest of Red Dwarf. At the time, I was excited because it had been like 10 years since there'd been an episode. So I was excited to see it when it came on. And you know, it had some good elements to it. Again, it's now been another 10 years since it was broadcast, and that was the last time I saw it. So I can't remember it massively clearly. I mean, it'll be interesting to see when we get to it on the podcast. It didn't quite work, but the later Dave stuff after that, when they did series 10, 11 and 12, and the more recent The Promised Land, which was last year, those have all been brilliant.
Yeah, and with Back to Earth, I thought it was a little bit odd when Dave Lister met Craig Charles.
Yeah.
It's like they've already given him enough work to do, being on Coronation Street to start off with. They can't, and it because Craig Charles is like, since doing Red Dwarf, has become more popular to do other stuff. So he was in Coronation Street for a while, and he's in the reboot. Well, you could technically call it a reboot of the Gadget Show, and he's all over the place now. And doing that just sort of felt a little bit odd, because it's like it would be more work for him, and it'd be harder to work out. And it'd be harder to work out for him who is he. He'll just be
One of the things Adam said when I think Adam said this, that he knew Craig Charles as the person from Robot Wars. So it was strange, like when he first looked into Red Dwarf, when I suggested it, that like, oh, he's an actor as well. I didn't realize that, because he didn't watch Coronation Street, so I didn't realize that. So he was just a bit surprised that he was an actor, because he sort of viewed him more as a presenter. But you know, he's not on Coronation Street anymore. I don't know if Robot Wars is still running.
No, Dara O'Brien. Dara O'Brien did it, and did a Champions, and then that was it.
Yeah, so Craig Charles is now sort of mostly back to being a radio presenter on Six Music and doing Red Dwarf.
Yeah, and then he does the Gadget Show on Channel 5, which...
Oh, okay.
Yeah, so he's not as you can tell, he's not a very techie person. So he does the presenting side, and then because the crew want to laugh, they send him to the house and they make him set up something with instruction, then they watch him just try and fumble about not knowing what's going on. And so you have to set up this smart light.
Yeah.
And you
I might have to check that out.
Yeah, and it's on My 5. Because it's on like series 33 or something. He's been doing it for a good few years now. And with Red Dwarf being this program that seems to never disappear, go on long breaks for how many years you want it to, then come back as strong as ever. Do you think that the Dave series is sort of like trying to capitalize on cameos of big other famous comedians, or do you reckon it's still stuck to its original BBC roots?
I mean, they've always had cameos. One episode we recently reviewed had, you might not have heard of her, but Ruby Wax had a cameo in it. And, you know, around the late 80s, Ruby Wax was a massive sort of TV personality, comedian person. So the BBC show, the version of it, also did that and had massive cameos as well. So I don't think it's any different in that respect.
Yeah, it's just when you look at it, you see, I saw like the episode Johnny Vegas is in. It's you more like Dave were trying to get you there to watch it because of Johnny Vegas, not because it's the boys from the Dwarf. It's
Oh,
just
okay.
trying to capitalize on Johnny Vegas being a policeman wearing a pink police outfit for some
Yeah.
bizarre reason. But with Dave trying to like have their own original stuff since he lost Taskmaster to Channel 4, with the Promised Land, it was, and the first 3 million years are one of the best things that could happen in the Dave era. What did you think of the first 3 million years documentary series?
I actually haven't watched it.
Oh,
Surprisingly enough, I know, shocking. I did watch Promised Land, but I didn't get around to watching the first 3 million years.
well, there's 3 episodes of the first 3 million years, and they talk about well, they've said it on many documentaries, past and present, but they talk about like the American version and a bit more history.
Oh, yeah.
And one of the things that I found really interesting is that anytime you saw any ship flying in the air, it was all Jerry Anderson. It was all the Thunderbirds team.
Yeah.
That did it all. And then when you watch it back, you realize, oh, it was. And it all makes
sense because their model work is fantastic.
Yeah.
And, a company like Jerry Anderson, that makes absolute sense.
Yeah. And with your podcasts on YouTube, you do really interesting things where you have like your characters on the screen with the voice, with the wave sounds. And what I was thinking is, would you ever want to try and like do like a one-off episode where you animate the characters to talk? Because I feel like that would, because I was looking at them thinking that they would work really well in like a animated
They would.
cartoon.
I would love to do that. And I think it would probably be one of those things which would take me too long to do. Like I fully had the intention when I got those drawings done to do something like very basic animation, like just like have them walk in onto the screen and like occasionally blink or something like that. And I haven't even got around to doing that because I commissioned the drawings from Sophie Isles, who is a fantastic sort of artist who does a lot of Doctor Who stuff. And so she did those for me. And they look fantastic. But like I say, I just haven't got around to doing any sort of even basic animation with them. I do like marvel at there's a YouTube channel Pup. And I'm sure there's just a system that he has, but I don't know how he does it. That like, because it syncs up with his mouth. He syncs the dog animation up with his mouth movements. My skill, I could probably do a YouTube tutorial on how to do that, but I have not yet learned how to do that in a timely way.
Well, there's an Adobe product called Adobe Character Animate, and what it is where you get your character on the screen, and when I talk, the character would move its mouth because it detects everything. So like you have to line up your face in with the camera.
And do you have to put in like loads of pre-drawn different mouth shapes?
Well, no, they've got it all there for you, so it's like already there. So when I first tried it out, I just got one of the pre-made circles with a mouth on it. I started talking about cheese, and it like moved every time I said the word cheese. The mouth was moving. It was on sync. And there's a YouTuber, I don't remember the name, where they did a load of Doctor Who, like when they like taking the Mickey out of Doctor Who, like the first series, and he's done a few songs of Doctor. I don't know if you've heard of him. He did one for series 1 where it's like it was all animated and it was like really
cool.
Quick.
Well, I might look into that program then because I have the full Adobe suite, but I only use like 3 programs of it. So I use Adobe Audition, I use After Effects, and I use Premiere. That's it.
I only use Photoshop, After
Effects,
and
Photoshop,
and Premiere. Yeah, I don't. Adobe Audition is good for if I want to do vintage effects, so they've got it preset. But I use Ableton Light, which is free, that I use for recording like audio, which is
okay.
I think is
I sort of trained on the precursor to Adobe Audition, which was called Cool Edit.
Yeah.
And then Adobe bought Cool Edit. And so while I was at uni doing a media production degree, that's what we were using for radio production. And so I know the sort of, I know that system. So it's nice and easy for me to use.
And with your podcast and your Red Dwarf podcast, I think is a fantastic idea. Would you do it again, like the same format but with a different show with different people on? Because I think
Maybe.
that with your knowledge, I think it would be really interesting. I was thinking, because I am not a Star Trek fan. That might shock some people. I'm a I don't like Star Wars or Harry Potter either, but that's another argument for another day. But because Star Trek's in so many different things, would that be something you would ever think of doing, like where someone's ever seen the original series?
Yeah, possibly. But I think that would just time commitment wise, I think I'd have to get this one over and done with first, and then maybe look at something. And I'd actually probably be more interested in sort of switching it round and me being the person that hasn't seen them before. So I don't know what that would be, but something that somebody else is really invested in that I haven't seen, and me being the person experiencing it for the first time.
Well, I'm always full of ideas. I don't mind admitting this on YouTube because it's a good place to say. I have so many ideas, too many amount of times of anything, from the creation of all 9 of my YouTube channels to 5 of my podcasts. Well, a 5th one yet to be announced. Ooh, a little bit of hint there. The second one got cancelled. It was rubbish. And I was always thinking about it. And then when I heard your podcast, I was thinking of ways I could do it. And I was thinking of ideas, and then all my friends have seen everything before. And then I thought, oh, I've never seen Star Trek. And I was thinking I could do that, but then have no friends that actually like Star Trek.
Okay.
Or have recorded equipment in the first place. So and then I just thought, I'll scrap that idea. I'll put that in the drawing bin.
Yeah, or just keep it for a later time. You know, it's always good to come back to ideas.
Yeah, and one of my other ideas that I don't know if you've seen this program, but it was an idea where it's like a sort of spin-off from a podcast I do on my 9th channel, and sort of it'll be like
so many channels.
Yeah, I'll get on to them in a minute. I'll explain them to you in a minute. But with a Taskmaster, if you've ever seen it.
I know of it. I haven't seen it.
Well, I was thinking about doing something like that because even though I'm obsessed with Doctor Who, people in recent times I think have been obsessed with Taskmaster because really funnily, the second interview after Adam Martin, because I interviewed him over on the main channel, I interviewed the wonderful Alex Thorne for this channel. So me and him have met each other. And so I was thinking of doing something like that because the idea works really well. You just have to think, you have to find a program that's you're really passionate. Like Red Dwarf, there's so much of it. It's so easy to get really passionate on it, and you have to find something where you like it or don't like. I've never seen it, and I have to find someone else. That's the whole hard part, finding someone else.
Yeah, and Red Dwarf was also a good one because there is enough of it to do it and it to last a good year, the podcast to last a year or two, but it's not so like Star Trek. There is a lot of Star Trek. Even just picking one of the shows, there is so much more than there is of Red Dwarf because they do 22 episodes a season and they do 7 seasons, whereas British shows tend to be a lot less episodes. So most seasons of Red Dwarf only have 6 episodes. So it's a more manageable thing.
Yeah. So an idea that popped in my head that I am going to say now because I find this really funny. But you could do like an outnumbered one. You would have to think of it. Because that's why I struggle with podcasts, is it's finding a really catchy name for it. So like the one that's a really good name that I'd so sad I never thought of was One Foot in the Podcast, which is a podcast about one foot in the grave.
One Foot in the Grave, yeah.
And then Monkey Tennis, which is an Alan Partridge podcast referencing something Alan said in I'm Alan Partridge, and then everyone said Dave was making me think, oh, why have I done this? Because I have my podcasts are Doctor Who Discussions, which was originally called Radio Epic, and that's my main podcast. Then it was Poddlebox, which was Gogglebox, but then it got cancelled because I talked to myself really, and it just didn't seem to be as interesting to talk about international versions of Gogglebox. And then my third one is TV Critic, where for this channel where I do other bits and bobs, not just reviewing stuff. And then my fourth podcast is Taskmaster World, the podcast, where I talk about all the international versions. And the fifth one is not yet been released and not yet been announced, and probably will just sink at its original base. And that's what annoys me. How was it easy coming up with the name of your podcast?
No, I wouldn't say it's easy. It was easy. There were several ideas, and I'd say me and Adam went back and forth for about a week. I shot him a few ideas. I was like, "What do you think about this?" And he was positive about most of them. But I was never quite sure. And then I hit on that, and I thought, "Oh, we can have Holly saying it in the intro," and they all worked out quite well. And I wanted something catchy. I'm trying to think of some of the other ones that were in the sort of short list. Boys from the Dwarf was another one that I almost went with. That's the only other one I can remember, but there were a couple.
Yeah, because there's a few other Red Dwarf podcasts, such as Meghead, which is a few of them. There's a lot of like podcasts have now become the second best thing from video. You're either doing, a lot of people are either doing YouTube or they're doing podcasts, because podcasts are now becoming the new radio. So when radio eventually sadly disappears, it'll all just shift over to a podcast.
Yeah,
because that's what BBC Sounds are doing a lot. So a lot of like people now having podcasts on there, and a lot of like fans are doing podcasts of everything. And out of the podcasts that you've heard, if you've heard any, what's your favourite podcast?
What, out of any podcast?
Yeah, out of any podcast.
I kind of fell out of listening to podcasts for a while. I've started to get back into them, which is terrible for somebody that works in radio. But I used to listen to a lot more than I did, and then YouTube has kind of taken over my free time and watching YouTube as well as making it. So I'm trying to think. There's a kind of radio drama one called Welcome to Night Vale, which is really good. At least it was last time I listened to it. I haven't listened to it in a few years. And there's lots of Doctor Who related ones, some of which I dip in and out of. Who Knew is I'm listening to regularly at the moment, and obviously Adam's podcast AMTV Radio I listen to every week. And then there's other ones which I dip in and out of, like Big Blue can't get my words out. You know what? Big Blue Box podcast. I can't get my words out.
It's like a riddle.
Yeah. So there's a few Doctor Who ones. What else is there? There was, over the years, I've listened to there's a great British history podcast called the British History Podcast, which is really good as well. There's been loads over the years, which I've liked.
And what's really interesting with all these podcasts, when you search it, when you have your own podcast, you search up like the genre it's in or something, and it's a big shock for you when you see it in like the first row, and you think, oh, you've beaten them, and then you're very close to them. So for me, with my Taskmaster World, the podcast, I've beaten the first ever in the list. I've overtook the first ever Taskmaster podcast, because Taskmaster themselves have made an official podcast, and I'm like well ahead of the first ever podcast that was ever made about Taskmaster, called Melon. I think it's either Melon Ball or Melon Head.
Nice,
referencing series 1, episode 1. But moving on to more of like comedy now. With comedy and sitcoms in general, if exclude Red Dwarf from this, what's your favorite sitcom that you've seen? It could either be when you were a child or now. It doesn't matter what genre era. Well, it's sitcom, but what era or decade?
I used to be a big Friends fan.
Mm.
Like I owned every episode on VHS of Friends. And I think my wife owns every episode on DVD. I think it might be up the loft. I haven't watched it in a while. So for a while, Friends was a bit like in my teenage years, watching Friends was the sort of main one. British ones I really like. You mentioned it earlier, actually. Outnumbered is a really good one. Just the kids in that are hilarious.
Oh, they are
just so good.
Ben's one of the greatest characters.
Yeah, and little Karen as well. She's great. And then what else was there? There's things like Stephen Moffat's old Coupling, which is really good. I really enjoyed that as well. That was good. And then I also like some really like old ones that I watched as a kid that were old when I was a kid as well, that were on repeats. Things like Dad's Army and stuff, because my dad used to watch them when he was younger. So he'd watch the repeats and I'd see those, and Hello, Hello and things like that. Yeah. Some of the old classics.
And with all these, with all the British sitcoms that was, and I think someone must have mentioned it on somewhere I've seen, but what do you think of like remakes? Because this is something that I think is an interesting topic to go to. Is with remakes. He did a remake of Outnumbered that's never seen the light of day, but then I think there's a program called Outmatched, which I think must be, which is where they've got kids that are more intelligent than the parents.
So are you talking about American remakes?
Yeah, it's not particular, because with The Office has had an American remake and an Indian remake, the Hot Star, and then IT Crowd has had an American and a German one, and then Taskmaster's had 15 different versions, and Gogglebox has had.
Yeah. Well, they're more like, because they're format shows, aren't they? So formats are easy to sell. And I don't know. I've not really watched many. I have seen clips of the Red Dwarf one, which is terrible. And I wasn't into the British Office, so I never watched the American one either. So I don't know. I think a lot of the time the problem with the American remakes when they try and remake something, because I think they tried to do an American version of Coupling as well.
Yeah, they did.
Is that they don't quite get the same. They don't have the same type of humor, so the jokes don't land in the same way, and it just kind of doesn't feel quite right. Yeah, most of the time.
Yeah, and it's with and they've done loads, but we'll go on to some of the new ones in a minute. But with them, it's like the ones that you watch and you think, ugh. The one I really don't like, because there's only a clip on YouTube which is called The Royal Guard, which is a remake of Dad's Army. Now there's a bit in Dad's Army where Pike's on the chair and he's saying, and like, don't tell me your name, Pike, which is the classic line.
Oh yeah.
Remake that exact scene in America, but with their specific words when they were singing the song.
Okay.
And they don't land. But have you seen the trailer for the US Ghost?
I have. Yes.
Have you seen the UK Ghost?
I've seen some of it. I haven't seen all of it, but I have seen bits of it, and I really like it. I need to watch the what I haven't seen. The American one, because when I first heard they were remaking it, I was like, oh god, that's not going to be good. And I watched the trailer, and I would say the ghosts themselves in the trailer actually quite impressed me, and I was like, oh, actually the humor comes across really well with the ghosts from what I saw in the trailer. It's just a trailer, they're going to show the best bits, but I don't think the couple worked as well. Again, it's just based on a trailer because of the type of personality differences that you get in like the American couple when they like the part of what makes the British one so funny is the main character's reaction to the ghosts. And it's much more deadpan and kind of like fed up and just like very almost low energy,
Yeah.
but in a good way. Whereas the American one, I think their tendency is to make everything high energy. So therefore, the sort of woman character that moves into the house has a very different feel to it in that trailer than the British one, and I'm not sure that's going to work as well.
Yeah.
See.
Yeah. And I don't know if you know this, but a few people that I've seen recently have been comparing that they think that Coupling might be the UK remake of Friends and that.
Yeah, that was a comment at the time as well, I think.
Yeah.
And there are a lot of similarities. I think the humor is very different, but the basic premise of it's 6 friends, half of which are male, half of which female, going, socializing, they're romantic. There's a lot the basic premise is similar, but the I think the type of humor and the jokes are very different.
Yeah. And so going back a few years now, what was your favorite, to wrap up this wonderful interview, what is your favorite TV show as a small wee child?
Oh, how old are we talking? Because I, probably changed.
Whatever age.
Well, funnily enough, this is, I think, was good. I think it might be my topic for my, I don't know when this is going out, but my, I've started doing a monthly live stream.
Yeah.
And I think my next topic is going to be childhood TV programs. So I'll probably talk about these in more depth then. But like when I was really little, I was quite into Thomas the Tank Engine.
Mm-hmm.
I had Thomas the Tank Engine wallpaper, I had Thomas the Tank Engine bed sheets. My dad worked on the railway, so I think that's probably where the influence came from. Then a sort of age 8-ish, I got into Power Rangers, which was new at the time. It was Mighty Morphin Power Rangers. The original had just started. It was when like Power Rangers was massive back then, and I had lots of the toys and stuff. So that was kind of that era. In terms of my main fandoms, teenage years is more like Buffy the Vampire Slayer.
Yeah, that's amazing. So. Buffy. That's one of those shows. It's when you watch it now and then you realize that you see, because I can't remember what he's called, but the one that plays Spike ended up being in Torchwood.
Yeah, James Masters. Yeah,
and then when you Google it, I only realized because you don't see the similarity because his hair and his whole face
and his accent, because obviously in Buffy he's playing a British vampire, but he's not British. The actor's American.
Yeah, and with like a lot of the programs from years ago of like don't like stick and you don't see younger kids go into them. What's one show that you watched as a child that would you show to your kids now?
When my kids are old enough, I'll probably show them Buffy. I think it's a good show that has a lot of good messaging in it as well, and good themes and stuff. Obviously, there's issues around the creator of it at the moment, but I mean, detaching that, there's a lot of people that worked on those shows, and it's not all Joss Whedon, and I think it's a good show, and the other people that worked on it put a lot of effort into it, and I don't think that should necessarily be forgotten. So at some point, probably that. Obviously Doctor Who at some point. I've started, my daughter's now 6 years old, so I've started to introduce her to a bit to Doctor Who and watching some of it, the ones that I don't think will scare her too much.
And so to wrap up the interview, what is the most recent DVD you purchased?
The Blu-ray Steelbook of Doctor Who Series 6.
Wow.
Which I bought off of eBay.
Wow.
Which arrived yesterday.
Wow. Yeah. So thank you for coming on to this other side. It's like we're on a different channel. Well, we are in a different channel, but the other side of the metaphorical pond shall we say. And I hope you enjoyed yourself.
Yeah, thanks for having me on.
Yeah. And I hope you guys enjoyed listening. There'll be more interviews coming soon. So keep your eyes peeled on the main channel and this channel and the night channel, because fingers crossed we get more English speaking Taskmaster related people onto that channel. Work in progress. But I hope you enjoyed this video. Time on, time out. Bye.